Hello, my name is Ramon Bassett, your host, along with our producer, Brennan Limbrick. Brennan, the last episode, we talked with Antonio Torres with VTS Rise about how property owners of multi-tenant residential and commercial buildings can integrate both operations and amenities under one access control solution. Now, today's topic is how businesses can utilize video cameras for both security and operational efficiency.
That's right, Ramon. Unfortunately, with the state of the world, security is on the forefront of everybody's minds. One of the most common deterrents are video cameras, and because of that, there are many types of cameras available, but not all cameras are created equal. Today's guest, Ramon, is Tim English with Axis, a longtime partner of Current Technologies. They have a full stable of cameras and analytics to not only provide security, but also help improve a business's operational efficiency.
Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Welcome to Cyber Connect, and thank you for joining me.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so to start, why don't you give a little bit of a background of yourself and why you decided to go with Axis, because I'm sure you could have picked a bunch of other type of companies.
Sure. Yeah, I had a number of experiences that led me to Axis. Way back in the day, I got hired by a partnership. So two companies, two partners, got $1,000 a month from one, $1,000 a month from the other. I was making 24 grand a year. I was positive I was rich and I would never need to go anywhere the rest of my life. But it was an interesting place to work. The one partner was a manufacturer rep for security products. The other partner did consulting on mission critical sites such as Department of Energy, nuclear power sites, and so forth. I didn't have any military background, but I did do training with those guards and on those sites. Essentially, I was just a warm body. I was getting handcuffed 20 times a night and staging protests and so forth, or pretend protests. And what we were doing at the time has helped me today, because what we were doing is we were looking for vulnerabilities. We were, taking a look at the site and saying, where is it easiest to penetrate and so forth. And we would run these force-on-force drills, and essentially we're in the full black suits. We had the fake guns. We had the earpiece for communication. And, one time we would attack the north side and try to get to the battery room. And then we'd do a debriefing. The next time we'd attack the south side and try to get the reactor. And it was very interesting, and it really taught me to look for, things like crime prevention through environmental design and vulnerabilities and so forth. And that helped me with doing a lot of site assessments today. The other side of the business was the manufacturer rep side, and we were doing video. At the time, it was analog video, and progressed through from analog to IP. It was a painful transition at times, but we also did physical access control. We did optical turnstiles, mechanical turnstiles, and as I was there over the years, I became more and more focused on video, and that really became what I concentrated on, and that led me to Axis. Axis pursued me about 8 years ago, and I have been a manufacturer rep for Axis for the last 8 years in the Illinois area.
Wow, that's great. That's fascinating about how you started out. And so when you worked in that for that company and you were looking at the nuclear plants and everything, was it there the nuclear plants defense team, or that would you're trying to get past? And
right. Yeah. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission set up a guideline, and they had to be able to defend against a 3-man team coming from the outside. And you would anticipate there'd be one friendly person on the inside, and they might, draw arrows on the floor to guide the outsiders to certain places, because those places are like mazes. And we were basically training the guard forces. So you had 3 shifts. You had to go do it during the day. You had to do the midnight shift, and I would train the midnight shift, and I was expected to be back at my desk at 8 in the morning selling cameras for the other partner. So
yeah, that's fascinating. That's pretty cool. Yeah. So now, Axis is known and has been known for high quality video cameras.
Right.
However, the growing demands of security, how has the Axis product line kept up with that growing demands? Because everything changes day to day.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. You're right. They certainly were known, and they are pretty well known still for their IP video cameras. Axis made the first IP video camera in 1996. That's not to say that there weren't security cameras before that, but they were all analog based. So they made the first one in 1996, and they were really well known for that for a long time. I kind of joke with my boss. He was out in the field before me, and he had his one indoor camera, his one outdoor camera, a pan tilt zoom, and an encoder, and that was all he needed. He didn't really have to worry about integration with all these different types of products. But as time has moved forward, we've seen the need to offer full solutions. So we are doing a very robust video management system now. We are incorporating access control in that video management system. So it's a unified platform. You're not looking at one server trying to speak to another server and that type of integration. So when we see a card swipe, you're going to see the information from that card presented alongside on the same screen. You're going to see that person actually walking through that particular door. Within the camera side, we've even developed quite a bit. We're doing thermal cameras, which are going to see heat instead of light. Body worn cameras, which you'll see local law enforcement using. There's actually a mandate. It's an unfunded mandate, but there is a mandate in Illinois that agencies are supposed to be wearing those in 2023. It's created a lot of buzz. We'll see again how far it goes because there's no money that's been allocated for it federally. We've also seen expansion again on that same platform, the capability of doing audio. So Axis offers a full IP audio line as well. Where might we use that? We see those used a lot in schools. We see those used a lot in factories where you might be making announcements on a regular basis. You might do paging. You might have music during the day. Could also be used for things like mass notification. That audio is also used in conjunction with the IP video where we perhaps are doing parking lot protection or perimeter protection. And if the camera is looking at a parking lot and perhaps we see someone loitering in that parking lot between midnight and 6, for instance, and they're there for more than 3 minutes, we can automatically have that network horn make an announcement. This area is under video surveillance. You're being recorded. Please leave the area. And if we don't get a response, we can step up to the next level of notification, and perhaps an operator, an owner, can get on their mobile phone, which is tied to that network horn, and say, hey, you in the green pickup, sitting on the hood with your red jacket, I see you, I'm here, you need to leave or the cops are going to be on the way. So it's really it's really a force multiplier. Beyond that, we're doing door stations. Traditionally you always had an intercom. It was at a front door. You'd push that button and it would go to a receptionist, but if someone wasn't there, you're kind of stuck out in the rain, and I literally was making a call to somebody, and that's all they had was a master station. It was literally raining out. I'm pushing the button. I got my equipment cases under my arm, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And I went right in and said, this is why you need this.
Yeah, right.
So it was kind of...
Well, we had one of my clients had it to where their reception area they were no longer having a greeter or receptionist down on the ground floor, so right. all the other people were on the top floor. So the way they had it previously before, and we did use your system, but previously they had to still come down and then still look around the corner and make sure it was the right person to come in, and it just was not efficient of time, nor was it safe still to be able to peek around the corner. So with one of your access control systems we implemented, now they don't have to do that. So they can just go right to their desk and such. So
it's all these improvements are about making it easier for the end user, making it very efficient. So now that same type of system, we can have it ring out to a mobile phone, we can have it ring out to a VMS, You can put a program, a soft phone program on any computer on the network. You can set up schedules. I want to, ring this person from, noon till 6, and this person from 6 to 9, and from 9 at night till 6 in the morning. I don't want to ring anybody. We don't want to be waking people up in the middle of the night. So a lot of capabilities have been added to that type of product line.
Wow. Now, when you mentioned earlier about the horn system and loitering in the parking lot, that reminds me, or that brings up a prolific type of theft that's going on is the catalytic converters, which I never would have put that together, that was going to be a big thing. I had one person mention and talking about that is basically like an organized crime, because they were able to, these are like professional. It takes like 2 minutes, possibly, up to 2 minutes to have a catalytic converter stolen. And it just brings a lot of money, big money on the market. So that is something that I don't think a lot of people have even thought about doing until recently, now that it's a big deal. So how would Axis, you have a perimeter defender, it's called, how would that help businesses in that case?
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of calls for protection of assets, mainly in those cases. Maybe we'll see bus depots or car rental agencies or anywhere where we have a whole bunch of a concentrated asset, the asset being catalytic converters. Access Perimeter Defender is a very effective analytic, but to really understand what that means, you have to kind of take a trip back to the beginning of using video for security. So for a very long time, we just recorded continuously. Everything was recorded. Nothing was really earmarked as more important. If something happened, you essentially had to go back and review that, and it was very time consuming. The next progression was recording on motion. So if we had let's say we have a bad guy approaching a bus depot area, based on that person moving through, you're going to have motion, and we would earmark that on the tape. There's somebody here. Here's a motion recording, and maybe you might speed up the frame rate. You might increase the resolution. But the challenge is every time the wind blows and you kick up some leaves, you are looking at motion, because all we're really seeing is a change in pixels with the old-fashioned, motion detection, or headlights from a car that's a block away. It sweeps through the image, creating motion because there is change in pixels. So it's kind of like, the boy who cried wolf. After a number of those false alarms, people would get essentially what we call in the industry alarm fatigue. And at that point, they don't want to be notified anymore. They don't want to run to the monitor and see what happened. So the bad news is that they're not responding to legitimate alarms in those situations. So what the industry came up with was a way of tracking behaviors. So one of the very first ones was line crossing. If you had a fence line, you could put a camera right down that fence line. One side is the secure side, one side's the unsecure side. If you have people in the plant on the secure side and perhaps they're cutting the lawn, that's not a reason for an alarm.
Right.
That's just activity. If you have someone on the outside, maybe it's by a bus stop and there's people moving around right here, again, not a reason for an alarm. If you have someone going from the inside to the outside, crossing that fence going this way, perhaps through a gate, that's okay. They've already presented their credential. They're inside. They have a legitimate reason for being there. No need for alarm. But if someone goes from the outside to the inside, that's when we want to get notified. And that was one of the first types of analytic where we're looking for certain behaviors. In the case of the catalytic converter, another way you could approach this in addition to Perimeter Defender is if you're viewing an area, we want to look for loitering, and we can identify, we're getting a little ahead of what I was going to speak about, but we can identify people versus motorcycles versus cars versus truck versus buses. So if we identify a person and we identify they've gone into this protected area, and we've identified that maybe they're loitering for something beyond 30 seconds, now we want to create some form of alarm. So that's in addition to the line crossing, now we have a loitering type of a application. The challenge with a lot of these big auto lots or bus depots is they have these very, very long fence lines. It's a big area to protect. So in the case of Access Perimeter Defender, what we're actually doing is perhaps using a thermal camera, which has a very long range of detection. And at the time of setting it up, we can calibrate the system. Well, what does that mean? That means that we actually have someone who would walk the system. They'd say, okay, this person is 6'2", and here's what a 6'2" person looked like 50 feet away, and here's what they look like 100 feet away, and here's what they look like 300 feet away. Because if you don't calibrate it in that way, you might get a trigger when they're up close, but when they're farther away, the system might say, well, that's not a person. They're only occupying 10 pixels, and a person should occupy 50 pixels like they do when they're up close. So it's a way of, letting the system know about perspective and what a man-sized mass would represent at different points along that fence line. So what we're really trying to do is make sure that when we trigger an alarm, it's not something like a bug on the lens of the camera. It's not simply something blowing through the scene like a piece of discarded paper. It's legitimately, this is a human going somewhere they shouldn't be.
Yeah, because when I'm interacting with a lot of prospective clients or clients that are moving from one system to another, they're like, they're experiencing that alarm fatigue, that notification fatigue. They're like, that lightning bolt or that squirrel keeps on coming by, and I keep thinking. So I found that they even turn off, even though they still have set up to get notifications. They'll turn off the notifications for them, and that defeats the purpose. So having that ability, and one instance where a large amount, many catalytic converters were stolen from a fleet of vehicles. They were coming from they were coming. They had an inside person somehow able to get in, but then they came up to that fence and they had everything ready, and he threw it over and it was just like that. So I could see how if you could have it to where thermal or however be able to pick that up, it will help prevent.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with that alarm fatigue, maybe they turn off those notifications, and unfortunately, sometimes we'll get the call after the fact. If they're just recording on motion, you get an angry call that says, "Hey, we bought this system. It's supposed to be the best, and we had an incident, and we went back and it wasn't recording, or we didn't get notified." And we don't want to point fingers, but you can go back through the administrative log and say, okay, well, on September 5th, John Johnson turned off that alarm because he's the guard and he was getting tired of listening to it. So what we're trying to do is avoid that situation altogether, add some intelligence to the system, and make sure when we're notifying someone, it's legitimate. And our number of alarms might go down from 100 a week to 3 a week. And so when you get that notification, it's a legitimate occasion that you need to react to.
So those cameras that you have, along with the analytics, is combined with that perimeter defender.
Correct. Yeah. The analytic is actually a program that runs on the camera itself. So think of the camera the same way you think of your phone. Your phone has some memory space. It also has some processing capability. The camera is the same way. It has memory, it has processing, and we're basically adding some rules to look for. And that might be, a line crossing, like we mentioned. It might be number of people passing through a particular door. We want to count the people. It might be we're looking for the characteristics that look like smoke. It could be almost anything. Just like you have a million different programs that are written for your phone, there's a whole bunch of different analytics that can be written for the camera and for the video system.
Wow, that's very impressive, and I'm sure that will provide at least some hope on these businesses that are just not prepared for for that.
Yeah.
What's going on, and even in proper apartment complexes, their cars being hit for their tenants, and all the way from business, commercial to private. So yeah,
it's an asset that is pretty easy to remove. It's worth a few $100s. People know it's there. Every car you see has one. So yeah, it's unfortunately it's really run rampant.
Yeah. So we change gears here slightly. Of course, security cameras. I mean, that's what they're known for, and they're very good and well needed. However, there is also that to where you can use those analytics to help improve operational efficiency.
Sure.
So, what are some of the examples of the analytics in a workplace operational efficiency type scenario?
Sure.
We've got the perimeter taken care of security wise, but now they want to maximize their efforts and operations.
Right. Yeah, and you're right to think of it not just in terms of security only. There are lots of ways of getting a good return on investment on your money spent for a video system, whether that's increasing production, managing, looking for compliance, all those types of things. So, for instance, in the retail world, retail brick and mortar stores are having a very hard time competing with the online presence. They used to get all the business, and now they're sharing that business. And they really want to make sure that their customers have the best experience possible when they take the time to drive to a brick and mortar store. So what they're doing is, for instance, one of the things they're doing is they're counting the number of people they have come in the door. They want to know right away that they're staffed properly. And once they begin doing that counting, it's always interesting because invariably they find out about some spike that they hadn't anticipated. Boy, did you know that we were getting all these people every Thursday afternoon? And it might turn out that people are trying to go find a nice outfit for the weekend, a day before. And it's not always well known. So the first thing we would do is we take a look at counting the number of people that come in. We begin to look for patterns. And then that way the retailers can make sure that they are staffed properly. When people are in a grocery store, for instance, they might see a pattern that if there are 5 people in line, the people will begin abandoning their carts. They'll fill it up and they're just like, you know what, I don't have another 15 minutes here. They'll just walk away from their carts. So we can do things like queue monitoring. If we have 3 people in line, no problem. If we get a 4th person, okay, it's getting a little bit longer wait. If we get a 5th person, we want to make an announcement to the break room. We need more people on cash registers right away. You think about a full cart of groceries. It's $200 or $300 a sale, and now that all has that sales loss. That all needs to be restocked.
Yeah.
Let's avoid that as much as possible. You can also do things like heat mapping. Where do people come into the store? Where do they spend their time? If you have an end cap that everyone visits with heat mapping, it'll show here's where people spend the most time in our store. You can also trace the paths of people throughout the store. They generally come in here, they go to aisle 1, they skip 2, 3, and 4, they go to aisle 5, and they go to the cash register. Well, why would that be important? If you have an end cap and you are negotiating with a vendor and you can show them, look, everyone who comes in the store stops and spends time here, and you're negotiating a discount or something along those lines, that can go a long way.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And there's also programs. I mean, it goes so much farther than it used to. You can look at shelves, and if there is empty spots on the shelves, there can be a notification. A lot of those shelves, it's up to the vendor, the supplier, to restock those. It may not necessarily be the grocery person. So if you look at a shelf of premix for margarita, and that shelf is empty July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and all these folks are walking in trying to get their margarita mix and it's gone. Now, as a store owner, you can go to that vendor and say, look, we have a challenge here. We missed out on X number of sales. Perhaps last year I have this history and we made this many sales. This year we missed out on that. And, it can't all be directly attributed to that, but it's certainly a large amount of that. And there may be need for some form of remuneration based on that. Another area that you see analytics kind of helping operational efficiency is actually audio. We have microphones that can be baked into the camera, or a microphone can work alongside the camera. State of Illinois, you have a dual consent. So if you're in my premises and I'm recording you, you have to know and be aware of that.
Yeah.
But what we're actually doing is we're not recording or transmitting that audio. We're doing analysis of that audio right at the camera itself. So, for instance, in a human resource environment, you and I are having a conversation. The audio analytic can detect aggression, not just somebody being louder, but actual aggression in the conversation. It's very interesting. They can look at the audio visually through a pictogram. They can analyze the algorithm of aggression. And if you and I are in human resources and you start becoming aggressive, you're a bigger guy than me, you could probably thump me on the head. We got to get somebody else in here to help me out. So let's, have some form of aggression detection. In a hospital environment, you might look at something like if someone's in a room and they cough. They cough once, no problem. If they cough 3 times a minute, no problem. If they're coughing 10 times a minute and they do that every minute for 5 minutes, maybe we need to make a notification.
So I could see because I know about the aggression side, unfortunately, within a few years, we've had times where in an HR situation, someone is being let go and they're getting obviously angry. They leave and they come back with a weapon and they, these mass shootings. And so that I could see how that could, if that was in place, at least get somebody else there, or at least protect initially, or at least kind of be able to head off some potential things in the future.
Yeah, and there's a number of areas where we see aggression detection being deployed. Certainly like in HR, but if you think about it, it's kind of interesting. In retail, where we do returns, people are trying to return things without a receipt that they've had for 60 days, and it's worth a lot of money, and they think they're going to get $200 back, and the person on the other side of the counter says, we're not going to take that back, and they begin to show some aggression, and at some point it becomes very uncomfortable for that person behind the counter because they got a big line built up, everyone's getting impatient. Let's deploy somebody like a store manager to lend some assistance in that area, take that person away, have a separate conversation, and they can get back to helping all the other people.
So it almost is wherever your imagination can take you, you can develop something that will help.
It's interesting that you say that, because what we are seeing now in the analytic world is folks that are coming in not with a in-the-box solution. They're saying, what problem do you have? And is it something that you can see or something that you can hear? So in the case of audio, maybe you have some bearings on this piece of machinery, and these bearings make a squealing noise in this back room for 3 minutes before this machine tears itself up and it's a $50,000 repair. And, had there been someone back in that room, they would hear it and they would, hey, we need to shut this down before, all hell breaks loose. If we put a microphone back there, you can actually have the analytics company can teach the system what noise we're looking for. This is the sound of a door closing. We don't care about that. This is the sound of someone washing something down with a hose. We don't care about that. This is the sound of these bearings at their breaking point. This is a mission critical thing. We need immediate notification of that. And they can write a rule around that. If you have a conveyor line, you're going to turn on this conveyor line, we could say there's position 1, position 2, position 3. We need to have a body at each one of these, or we can only run at 25% speed. And if we have 5 bodies, we can run at 50% speed. And if we have 8 bodies, we can run at 100% speed. We don't want to run into like one of those I Love Lucy's where the conveyor belt's going and there's food flying all over. So that's kind of the interesting twist, is these analytic companies are saying, yeah, we have all these solutions over here, but what do you need? What do you look for when you're on-prem? What do you listen for when you're on-prem? How can we add that intelligence to this equipment and give you essentially not just another set of eyes and ears, but another set of eyes and ears that is intelligent and knows what they
Because I've been in situations where in a facility like you're talking about, to where they have to have that machine a lot of times 24 hours a day,
right,
and they want to make sure that something isn't backing up or doing that. So that's very important. I can see that being very useful.
If some of those environments, if those machines go down, it begins costing thousands of dollars an hour in lost production, like immediately. You have 15 people standing around. You're not producing anything. Maybe there's an expectation of a shipment, and that's not going to happen anymore. There's a lot of damages that can really be accrued from something like that.
So, since it has that dual purpose of security and operational efficiency, would it be a strategy to be able to pay for this by spreading out the cost centers? You can take some money from security, take some money from operations,
right,
take some money from facilities, and pull it together to be able to take care of this, rather than it only laying on one department. Is that am I accurate?
Absolutely. When we look at these, sometimes deploying cameras, it can be a hefty cost. But as you're saying, if we can go to human resources and show them how they're going to benefit, if we can go to management and say, look, you have 3 shifts. We can help you increase the productivity of that 3rd shift in this way, and immediately see some of that return on investment. Then you are starting to go to different buckets for financial assets within a company, and it makes it a whole lot more feasible to do that.
That's a good key. That's a good key. So leads to my last question, because you have all this analytics, all this information, all this data that you're taking in via the camera, and it's going to go to some type of video management system or software. And you mentioned early on about before the early analytics began to happen, they'll record all the time, and then have to sit there and look through all 24 hours of each day to be able to find this. And it can get very cumbersome. I do know there's some now that there are some new features that are made available inside of video management systems to make it a lot easier for the operator to use.
Right.
And so what are some of those new features that?
And I always have to back up a step to kind of talk about a particular answer to a question. It's interesting, when we first came out with VMSs, we used to have a full day of training, and that was just to be an operator. That wasn't to install it or anything else. That was just so you could operate it. And it's become so much simpler as of late. Part of the heavy lifting is being done by the cameras now, and the cameras and the VMS are working together to do classifications. What does that mean? That means that we can identify, again, a person versus a person on a bike, a motorcycle, a car, a truck, and so forth. Why is that important? There are going to be environments where there should never be a car. There are going to be environments where there should never be a pedestrian. For instance, you'll see tunnels, very small constricted areas. If someone gets out of their car in a tunnel, it's immediately a very dangerous situation. You'll also see that in, for instance, a fast food restaurant. You have the drive-thrus, and you might have seen the signs that say, we will not serve walk-up customers. The reason they're putting that sign up is it's a lot of liability. If someone is walking through a drive-thru and they get bumped by a car, immediately, they're open to, a lawsuit. On the flip side of that, if you have a pedestrian mall or a fairgrounds, all kinds of pedestrians, there should never be a vehicle. You want to be immediately notified of that type of environment. So when we're talking about the VMS and the ease of use of the VMS, we can have the camera do some of those notifications, and then the VMS can work together to understand what the camera's information that's being presented to it. So if you were doing a search, for instance, and you knew that you had a UPS truck and there was a issue with the UPS truck and we knew it happened between 12 and 6, we can say, I'm looking for a truck, I'm looking for this color of truck, I'm looking for it traveling northbound, and I'm looking at it for these hours. And it will pull thumbnails of anything that matches that description.
Okay.
Or if you had a person like myself, I'm wearing a blue shirt and brown pants. The person we're concerned about was wearing blue shirt and brown pants. I need to search, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for anybody in this area who matches that description. If you could imagine how long it would take an operator to go through and scan through and find that, versus the VMS being able to just do a search and say, here's all the examples we found. There might be 50 of them, but you can quickly go through those, versus fast forwarding through all that information. So it's certainly helped doing searches. One of the main complaints we get from end users, and legitimately so, is it takes so long to find something when something happens. Also, you can visually have a timeline, and that timeline will represent different incidents. We had motion, that is going to be shown on the timeline in this way. And you know what camera it's on, and you know what time it is. We had we had some type of a physical alarm, either a contact or a panic button or something else. And it makes it very efficient if you're an operator or an owner and you come in and you say, okay, we closed last night at midnight. I had activity on the dock right up until midnight. The guys came in at 6. I have activity on that dock right at 6. I don't even really need to go back and look at it because I have so much activity. I know there's several people there, but why do I have activity in this area at 3 o'clock in the morning? There shouldn't be anybody there. So visually, without even, doing a lot of scanning back and forth, here's an anomaly and we need to investigate that anomaly. You can also do things like on the VMS's video redaction. Maybe you're working with a school district. People are very sensitive about their children being recorded, and people are becoming very sensitive about just some of that private information becoming public. So maybe we're looking at a playground and we just want to know if a child, went across the sidewalk towards the street. Maybe we don't absolutely need to identify that children. We just want to make sure that we don't have anybody going in that area. Or you could use it like maybe you have a very sensitive research area. You want to see your people moving, but we want to blur out everything in the background. So that can all be pixelized and blurred out. You could see the people moving, but perhaps not see what's going on in the background. Or even vice versa. Maybe we want to see the operation of the conveyor belt moving, but the union may have a problem with actual individuals being able to be identified. So we can see the bread moving down the line, we can see the person standing there and doing their job, but we might pixelize out, their exact identification. So a lot of different ways that the VMS is becoming more efficient, more effective.
And being a tool rather than, oh boy, we have to look through all this data and see that.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of them have mobile devices, mobile apps of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can do on your.
You can be on the beach in Miami and checking out what's going on at your plant in Plainfield, Illinois.
Yeah. So I'm glad when you said, oh yeah, me, I have a blue shirt and tan pants. Usually everybody uses the thing. Yeah. There's a guy in a red shirt with a bat. I'm like, man, criminals must wear a lot of red shirts, because almost every scenario I talk to somebody, it's like, yeah, so you can go at red shirt. So, but that's great.
If it were only that easy and we could identify him,
right?
Oh, here comes the criminal. He's got that red shirt.
Red shirt on. Yeah. So, all right. Well, Tim, thank you very much for being our guest on Cyber Connect, and for sharing how organizations can not only benefit from a security perspective, but also from an operational standpoint, and to give some great ideas of maybe there's a business owner that hadn't even thought about some of the analytics that you can do, or their operations manager and or facilities, and they're really just concerned about that noise. They don't want to get to that noise, but now they have something that they, maybe I have something that might be able to solve that. So that is very well. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you are angry with the onslaught of catalytic converters being stolen from your company and your employees' vehicles, or you're frustrated with not having the right tools for increasing your operational efficiency, reach out to me and we can schedule a demo. We can come on site, look at the scenario, look at the angles, listen to what is important to you, and we'll be able to help customize a solution for that. So you can reach me at 630-317-5657 or by email rbassett@currenttech.net. You can also enjoy my weekly technology videos by following me on LinkedIn and YouTube at #ITYouCanThriveOn. As I say goodbye, I want to thank our producer Brennan Lembrick and our sponsor Current Technologies. Until next time, be safe.